Hello guys, I record this video after 3 Russian MiG-31 violated the airspace of Estonia, a NATO country. What is worse, these aircraft were armed with R-73 missiles and they spent in the skies of Estonia 12 really long minutes. This is not a mistake. This is not a provocation, but a very open escalation from the Russian side. During this month, we witnessed a lot of Russia's violations of NATO borders, on sea, in the air, and on land. We will discuss all of that in the video, but I want to tell you, I'm speaking as a friend, as an experienced Ukrainian, and I'm not going to frighten you. Together we will try to understand why is it happening and what would be the proper reaction, based on the Ukrainian experience and the experiences of the previous wars. I always love to put myself in a situation 20, 30, 50 years ago. What would be the reaction of NATO on Russian military aircraft spending 12 minutes in the space of a NATO country? Perhaps something more understandable, something more visible, something similar to the response of Turkey in 2015, when Russian Su-24 spent just 17 seconds in the airspace of Turkey and was shut down. No negative consequences came to Turkey from the Russian side. What is more interesting, they stopped violating or testing the borders of Turkey. I have one suspicion that people in the Western Europe, in the United States, see my part of the world, Eastern Europe, former Soviet republics, still in a little bit different light, and that you treat us as different, closer to Russia, a little bit barbaric, and that's why we respond to the provocations, and you cannot afford it because you value human life. But I can guarantee you, we fight for the saving of human lives, because where Russia comes, tortures, mass murders, and other tragedies come. What we are doing is an investment in saving more innocent lives. And weakness is not a response. It only feeds aggressors and gives them more green light to attack more and more countries. And I'm not exaggerating. Subscribe to join the community of friends to demonstrate your solidarity with Ukraine and also to learn from our experience. I believe that is very important. So let's begin with this most recent provocation, escalation, whatever you choose, but this does not change the situation in general. 3 Russian MiG-31, these are fighter aircraft, armed with R-73 missiles, so they are not a passenger military jet or something like that, crossed the borders of Estonia. They did it intentionally, no matter what they say. There were three of them. They crossed the border and they spent in the airspace of Estonia 12 minutes. 12 minutes and nothing happened to them. They were photographed, maybe they were escorted by some of the NATO aircrafts, but this is a very weak reaction. And this accident is the result of the weak response of 19 Russian drones in Poland. We will speak more about that later in the video, but let's try to understand what happened to Estonia. 3 Russian military aircraft appeared in the skies of a NATO country. Of a NATO country in constant danger from the Kremlin invasion, if you listen to the official state TV of Russia, which denies the existence of Lithuania, of Estonia, of Latvia, which invests a lot of money in various provocation, pro-Russian movements in these countries, countries that clearly understand the danger of the Kremlin, countries that were once unlucky to be a part of the USSR. And I'm sure if I have people watching us from the Baltics, they know the danger is real. I have a lot of friends in Lithuania, in Estonia, and they constantly say they are super worried because they understand they lack strategic depth. I'm not sure if you know the term, but this means that countries are pretty small, and if Russia wants to do something evil, it will not take that long. Good people in the comments will keep saying NATO will interfere, but with each such weak response, I have more and more doubts NATO will respond. And Trump keeps repeating that Baltics, it's such a problematic region. So it's up to the people of Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, definitely Ukraine will support you, but we are demonstrating a very wrong attitude at this moment in history. NATO itself was developed as a defensive alliance to stand against the Soviet republics, to stand against the Iron Curtain, against the Eastern Bloc. And why don't you feel that it still exists? The threat is real. Putin is working on the reconstruction of this monstrous Soviet Frankenstein. So right now, NATO is needed more than ever, and what we get? Photos. And Mark Rutte is satisfied that they have photographed a lot of the Russian aircraft. Subscribe and share these videos to spread the truth. You know, I have decided to make a brief list of the things that Russia did to NATO, and there are a lot literally in the air, in the sea, and on land, because we can treat drones as on-land provocations. They aren't flying really high. In the Baltic Sea, in the Black Sea, there are lots of reports of Russian warships violating the territorial waters of the Baltic states, and Romania was recently dissatisfied with the Russian warships coming too close. I'm not even mentioning the hybrid warfare that they constantly practice with underwater cables, with internet connection, with their shadow fleet tankers spilling toxic things in the waters next to countries of Europe. These are acts of open aggression. Yes, it's a hybrid form. Don't wait for the Russian soldiers on tanks. They won't come like that. They will target the most sensitive areas with drones, for example. Drones are a serious problem. We have to be realistic. Right now on this planet, we have two countries, two armies that know really well how to fight with drones. One is our enemy, Russia. The second one is Ukraine, us. We have special forces, unmanned aerial forces. We succeed in destroying lots of legitimate military targets deep inside the Russian Federation. We already stop Russian drones with our drone interceptors. That is the future. That is exactly how Russia plans to attack NATO countries. And they already tested openly in Poland. 19 drones are not a mistake. In Lithuania, in Latvia, there were reports. In Romania, these are not accidents, people. People, do not trick yourself. This is not the way to solve the problem. So it's pretty obvious for me that NATO does not want to invite Ukraine just because it fears Russia. Russia does not want Ukraine in NATO because it understands it will be very difficult to keep invading us if we are a NATO country. But NATO needs Ukraine. And I believe NATO generals, NATO managers, even Rutte himself understand that Ukraine is no more a burden, Ukraine is an asset. But they keep fearing Russia, thinking that if they sacrifice, abandon, close the eyes, don't let Ukraine lose, but don't let Ukraine win, they will satisfy Putin. No, you won't. Because he sensed blood, he sensed weakness. He feels he can attack Poland, and Poland will pretend nothing happened, nothing serious happened. It might have been a mistake, we'll say, the president of the United States. Can you imagine Reagan saying something like that? Anyone, literally anyone from the 20th century, any of the US presidents. Then we have Estonia with 3 Russian MiGs in its skies. And what's the reaction? Photos. It is an open invitation for Putin to continue. He feels that Europe does not want to fight. The United States give Russia green light. And here I'm not talking about the beautiful people that support us. We feel that. But I'm talking about Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, people who openly let Putin do what he wants and actually applaud him, invite him, roll red carpet in front of him. And forget one very important fact. The Second World War also began with appeasement, also began with the sacrifice of smaller countries for the sake of bigger countries, or maybe satisfying some desires of strong leaders. Of course, I'm saying that in a very ironic way. And then it continued with the provocations on the borders, minor provocations. And Poland, the war against Poland began like that, with provocations on the Polish-German border. Why do we think that what Russia does now, witnessing that NATO is not ready to demonstrate strength, that the White House is in total chaos and is just like, that's the best timing? That is going to be a very unusual question, but put yourself in the shoes of Vladimir Putin. That's disgusting, I understand, but just for a second, imagine that you have 1 million soldiers, you don't want them back in Ukraine, back in Russia. You cannot win a lot in Ukraine. People are well trained, determined to defeat the evil, develop new technologies. And then you have Trump in the White House, who desperately likes you, just like a boy. He has dreams about Putin. Then you see the weakness of many European countries that don't want to fight, that want to believe it's just a Ukrainian local conflict when it's not. When drones are already on your territories. Why wouldn't you choose this moment for a small victorious war? Because you cannot bring the news about Ukraine as a success story in Russia. They do understand that dozens of their regions are a war zone already. They understand they are a no-fly zone. They see constantly rising prices. They realize banks may collapse, recession, stagnation. That's all real. And the price was too high. But if they, for example, choose to attack the Baltics that lack the strategic depth, well, my region in Ukraine considered one of the smallest, and that can be equated to some of the Baltic states. This does not make them less important. They are the greatest supporters of my country, and they help us stand against Russia every day, because they know the truth. And I can guarantee you that the Ukrainian army will always stand together with the Baltic countries. Always. But isn't there an agreement, a NATO, Article 5? I'm sure it will be challenged in the months to come. And it's so interesting to observe how many good people believe that Trump, as the president of the United States, will solve all the wars, but it looks just the contrary. That the number of conflicts, the number of the violence around the world is only growing because we lack leadership. And I see that leadership in the Ukrainian army. We are determined to do the job. Please support us. The only way to protect Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Finland, the only way to protect Germany, the only way to protect United States to a great extent, because big war in Europe will have very negative consequences for the American safety and economy too. And wars on the American continents, do you really want that? So the only way is to help Ukraine finish Russia, and you can see we're doing really well. We've destroyed their economy. They did not manage to get at least 1% of the Ukrainian territory during the last 1,000 days of war, when they lost hundreds of thousands of people. Think about that, and it has to give you more strength and determination. Because it's super important to see the reality as it is, not to hide from the truth. And here I want to quote one story that I remember from the Ukrainian social media. A couple of days ago, it made me feel very emotional. It was about a person that didn't have time to hide in a bomb shelter, or didn't want to do it after an exhausting day. It's a wrong decision, but it happens after 3.5 years of war. So this war will be longer than the Great Patriotic War for the Soviet Union, because it began fighting in 1941. And during the 2 previous years, the USSR was an accomplice of the Nazi Germany. Don't forget about this too. But this is a very long war. People get exhausted, tired, and that person didn't go into a shelter and stayed in a bed, hiding with a blanket, like hiding your head with a blanket, and believing that it gives you some kind of protection. We do understand it's totally fake, and a blanket cannot save you from a drone or a missile, but you can feel this, like it returns you back to your childhood or something like that. And I feel that NATO, big, strong, rich alliance that always trained and was designed for a similar situation, similar scenario that we experience right now, does the same. Hides with its head below the blanket, thinking it'll pass. No, it is only growing. And I've heard some people saying, oh, Ukrainians, you're fighting so hard because you are not afraid of the nuclear escalation, because you're too brave, but that's a bit of barbarian. Turkey shut down the Russian Su-24 in 2015 because they are a little bit barbarian. We Westerners are more humane, we care more about life. No, people. It doesn't work like that, and we're not barbarians. By the way, let me know, what do you think about this idea in the comments below. Think about the Second World War. Does giving up save lives? Did those countries that surrendered to Hitler succeed? No, because I can prove you what happens now on the temporarily occupied territories, where people are tortured, killed are stolen, and all the men are conscripted and sent to meat grinders to fight against their home. And they don't have a choice. Trust me, they have mechanisms to persuade you. So our task is to see the truth. I'm asking you for that. Please spread the truth, share this video, subscribe, join to our community, follow me on other social media that you will find in the description of this video, because Russia wants you to relax. Russia wants you to accept more drones, more missiles on your territories, pretending it's a mistake. Why aren't they afraid of that mistake? And please tell me why shooting down a Russian drone, even without any pilot in it, it's just a piece of iron, is an escalation. Plus, Russians officially never say they entered the airspace of Poland or they entered the airspace of the Baltics. Why shooting down a Russian drone, is an escalation? Why do you keep repeating that? That's nonsense. It's just like destroying a Russian refrigerator would be an escalation against the Kremlin. That's a beautiful example by one Ukrainian intellectual, Portnikov. Isn't that funny? Like, why shooting down a drone that does not have any pilot in it is an escalation if Russia itself denies the presence of these drones in your territories? And why it's okay for Erdogan to shoot down Su-24 after 17 seconds in the airspace of Turkey, and it's not okay to do the same after Russian MiGs armed with R-73 missiles spent 12 really long minutes in Estonia. Let me know, what do you think in the comments below. Check the merch shop, the link in the description. Our t-shirts and sweatshirts may help you become Ukrainian ambassadors and remind the world Russia can and will be defeated. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, but most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!